Hey everyone, it is time to do the next video lecture. Hope you're all hanging in there with this tough situation. I'm going to keep plugging away, keep making sure I try to stay on top of things. So let's get right into this lecture on public relations. Now, public relations is something I've had a little bit of experience with. For the city of Harrisburg, most of my experience has been in uh, journalism and TV news, as you know. Did have a little taste of public relations and utilizing the skills I have, so I have a little background with that. So let's get started. All right, what are public relations? Well, as you know, you're very familiar with celebrities, politicians, and social media. Social media, they do allow celebrities and politicians to communicate directly with their audience. So it is very much used within the public relations field. So it's become a tool very much so within the PR field. They've had many tools over the years. People like Vin Diesel have become absolute stars within the social media universe. You can see that with the Fast and Furious movies. I'm not a big fan of that. There's a reason I don't have those in the list of movies. I'm trying to get you away from those. So let you know there's other things out there, but public relations is doing a been a huge deal for Vin Diesel and the marketing of that movie. And if you look at the other stars in that movie, quite a few of them have very high social media profiles, and that's helped the numbers of the sales because of their ability to promote themselves as the stars they are, and that has a lot to do with public relations. Now, what is public relations? And here's the official definition. Public relations refers to the total communication strategy conducted by a person, a government, or an organization attempting to reach and persuade an audience to adopt a point of view. That seems like a real important aspect to understand. Hint, hint, hint. If you're going to know about public relations, you should probably know the definition. All right, so it's their job to make people think in a positive way, or at least be able to minimize the damage of a negative event or something of that nature for a business, for a person. Depends on who the business or who the person is. Like I said, with a lot of this stuff I talk about, we can do great good, but it can also do great evil depending on who it is, what the message is being put out there, and what is the final result of their message and what comes of it. So there's good PR, there's bad PR, there's well done. When I mean good and bad, is when sometimes it's well executed, sometimes it's not so much, and then they have to clean up the mess again. All right, two major figures in public relations are P.T. Barnum and Buffalo Bill. P.T. Barnum, you may be familiar with that name, Barnum and Bailey Circus, very long time circus. He was, well, among other things, a circus promoter, and he was also in, he got started as a journalist. Didn't last that long because he had gross exaggerations and fraudulent stories. He wound up being a press agent. He that's where he got the thing "Greatest Show on Earth." It still lasted well until the closing of the circus very, very recently. And he had people like Jumbo the elephant, Dumbo from Disney. Well, that's where that originally came from. Tom Thumb, a smaller person who we call Tom Thumb. There's lots of he was known for his exaggerations of things to bring in people. It wasn't necessarily true, but they were advertised in that way. Why? Because he was trying to sell something. And then there was Buffalo Bill Cody, and he had his Wild West show and Congress of Rough Riders of the World. It was a traveling show, and they had all sorts of recreations of gunfights from the Civil War and battles of the Old West. And this was a way to entertain, but they was also a way to promote what they were doing. It became very popular for the time. Buffalo Bill Cody. One of his things was he was called Buffalo Bill because he killed out buffalo for the railroads. He was a person who he would hire agents, press agents, and they used the wide variety of media channels for the time. Remember, it's not like we have now, but whatever they did have back then, they used it to promote and became a very big deal in that time. It also shaped a lot of myths about rugged American individualism because of his story of how he came to be, coming from nothing. And he was also the first person to use what is called publicity. And you hear publicity, oh, you kind of know what it is, but you want to probably know what the definition is. And that definition is, and this seems kind of important, a type of PR communication that uses various media messages to spread information about a person, a corporation, an issue, or a policy to elevate entertainment culture to an international level. And he was able to do that because it did get beyond just the United States. So yes, P.T. Barnum, Buffalo Bill, Cody, two very big historical people, and this was a very big deal for back then because he wouldn't have been nearly as big if he didn't get that publicity out. Now, when you think about what first PR people were, the first PR people, if you think about it, were theatrical press agents. Basically, they wanted to take a client and get media exposure, and basically what they would do is they have stunts, and they would stage those stunts to get that the exposure. And one of the people that they did that were Daniel Boone. He wound up later, and Davy Crockett. So these were people who had press agents, and their names became very popular in historic ends and days. Which then we come to big business and press agents. Now, basically, for a while there, the companies, we were making a lot of money with the Industrial Revolution. They didn't care so much at first about what people thought. They just wanted to make their money. They didn't understand that the importance of a good corporate image had potential to make more money for them. And you can see that in the 1800s, these companies started hiring these agents, these press agents, and among the first one were the railroads. You think about the 1850s, they wanted to expand, and one of the first things they did was in the 1850s, what they said was to ease the tensions between the North and the South, to promote expansion down there. Apparently that didn't work very well since the Civil War. We all know what happened there. But this is where we first see a major company, and that was the railroads, utilize public relations. You'll find that other companies, utility companies, did it because they wanted to hurt the competition. This is how lots of some monopolies started popping up, because they would use the PR firms or the PR people or the press agents, will have you, to downplay and denigrate their competition, so they would have the top status. Also, part of the problem, what they would do is they would use bribery, fraud, to get support and eliminate the competition, sometimes with government, sometimes with media outlets. So this was a problem. Now, there's you think about the real birth of what you think about modern public relations that started around 20th century. And there's two such people, Ivy Ledbetter Lee and Edward Bernays. They both, first Ivy Ledbetter Lee, he did understand the importance of public sentiment. Among the things that he is 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 known for was one of them was the Ludlow mine strike. There was a strike at a mine, and and then there was some people coming in to break the strike. And what wound up happening was there were a lot of deaths that included women and children. And within the strategy of what Ivy Ledbetter Lee did, he said, "Well, there's some sort of fire popped up, and these women and children that were there, they knocked over." And in his explanation, which people doubt, said, they call in a way partly caused their own death. So this was to help that specific mining company. Um, but one of the things he also did was he was prominent in hardly telling companies to use honesty in some instances, to instead of maybe deny certain things, to turn it around, or to try to minimize the damage in a way, to because the other previous people before them would always say deny, deny, deny. That didn't always work. So he was a former reporter, and in 1906 he went to work for the railroad, and there wound up being a railroad accident there, and they hired him because they wanted to downplay the negative uh, repercussions that they were to get from the public. So they told him, all right, you have to embrace this, be honest about it. And people like John D. Rockefeller, if that sounds pretty familiar, major oil magnate. But he wound up having some issues and problems as well. We talked about the muckrakers, and one in particular, McClure's magazine. Well, he had to help out. Mr. Lee had to help out with the PR for that, and Mr. Rockefeller, and so he basically put him in um, overalls and made him look like a down to earth working man kind of thing, and it worked, I guess, for the time. I don't know if it still works to this day, but it worked then. So yeah, Ivy Ledbetter Lee was known for being one of the first PR people out there, um, more press agent, and so, but he was still considering a founding father of what public relations is, dealing with a lot of transportation companies as well. All right, so then that brings us to Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays is the nephew of Sigmund Freud. You're familiar with that name, a long-time psychological psychiatrist and icon in that realm. Basically, he wound up working for lots of different companies, including General Electric, tobacco companies, General Motors, Good Housekeeping and Time Magazine, Procter and Gamble. Hey, look, RCA. Oh, so he used to work for David Sarnoff. Hey, look, David Sarnoff. Once again, pops his head up again in public relations. I guess he would need some help with public relations to be able to be in the position he was for so long. India, the city of Vienna. He worked for Calvin Coolidge, former president. So he worked for a lot of different companies, and he's known for developing propaganda. This is not something I'll be honest with you. This is not something I'm a big fan of. I am from the media side of it, so We have very much a rivalry. We're always trying to get the truth. They're always trying to put out the best message. So lots of times we kind of clash. So this is going to be a difficult chapter for me to talk about, but I got to do my job. I'll do the best I can. But this is where we see mentality of we saw Bernays portrayed President Wilson as a peacemaker during the end of World War One. He was also the first person to have a class called Public Relations at NYU in 1923. He called public relations as the attempt by information, persuasion, and adjustment to engineer public support for any activity, cause, movement, or institution. This is, that's something if you can do great good or you can do great evil. Being able to sway minds is a very powerful ability, and this is something I've been telling you since day one. So this should not be shocking to hear that from me. Like to say I do have an issue with that. I really feel people should be able to make that decision for themselves and not be swayed one way or another. But that's their job to minimize damage and try to promote some things. And I think it's more what the company, organization, or the person is, because all companies and all organizations need some sort of public relations. So, I think it's a matter of what the message is and what's being done. It's because you can do great good with it. It just depends on what you're doing. Now, one of the big things that Edward Bernays was prominent for accomplishing was he was hired by the American Tobacco Company. He made it popular and socially acceptable for women to smoke. Prior to that, it wasn't considered appropriate for women to smoke. Now, if you think about that, it's from from a sense of equality and freedom. Of course, men and women should be absolutely equal. But from another standpoint, you think, it's for the American Tobacco Company, and most of them are men, so they want a whole other set of customers. So that's probably why they wanted to do that. And they kind of considered he called the cigarettes torches of freedom. But if you think about it this way, how many women would have not died because of that? It's their choice. It is freedom of choice to do that. But there's also people who might say, what would happen to if all those women who didn't start smoking because of that? How many people wouldn't have had health problems or died or had cancer because of that? You can see it in a couple different ways. But he portrayed it in a way of freedom. Women should have the same rights to do that as men, and should be just as socially acceptable. Some things that he wrote and said, there's some things, and I'm not going to lie to you, I do have some issues with what is said, and I'll quote what it is said in the book: the duty of the higher strata of society, the cultivated, the learned, the expert, the intellectual, is therefore clear. They must inject moral and spiritual motives into public opinion. I have a real problem with that, but that's the mentality of Edward Bernays. I hope, if anything, if you get what you get out of this lecture is, hey, maybe things aren't as they always seem. I warn about it all the time, and most people think I'm crazy when I say these things. But what we do is very important and very powerful, and I'm not going to lie, I have a real problem with that mentality. I think a person should do it on their own and be given the truth. There's a lot to be said. So if you haven't learned anything else, maybe this will open up your eyes of a lot of mentalities. Not just him, but it's an entire industry and the way entire people think that are in that level or in that industry, or even when you get higher and higher within the government and other high corporate aspects of society. So it's kind of just to kind of get you start to think, hey, maybe things aren't always as they seem. So that's all I'm saying. All right.